Hi everybody, welcome along to this edition of Lyre Confidential on LyreMedia.tv, and the email and phone numbers at the bottom of the screen if you want to contact us and leave a comment, feel free to do so. And press the red button on the right hand side to subscribe to our channel. It's free of charge on our YouTube channel where all our programs are. Hey, good evening or good afternoon. What time is it now? It's 3:05. So time flies. Good afternoon, Jamie O'Mahony, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Pat. Delighted to be here.
So Jamie is here with us today because he has started an organization called Students Supporting Israel, which I must say in this environment in Ireland at this time was, I'll tell you at your age, at any age, was certainly with the hostility. It can only be described in Ireland, the outright hostility bordering on anti-Semitism against anything Israel in Ireland has been phenomenal to say the least, and it has been noticed internationally as we know ourselves. But you're going to where are you attending college, Jamie?
So I'm currently about to finish second year in Dublin City University on the north side of Dublin, about 20 minutes outside the city centre. Um, yeah, so that's my current situation, studying international business with French, but most of my interests would be in the political and kind of diplomatic realm.
Yes, yes. Now, uh, tell me, how did this come about? How did you get this started? In particularly in university where they pay lip service to free speech, as we know. All the
Mhm.
universities in Ireland and in England and all. It's just there isn't any free speech except you're a supporter of terrorism. You seem to
Yeah.
be able to wear terrorist insignia and all of that, which is very disturbing. But we'll just put up the lads there. We can talk away over it. Student support is, and how did it come about, Jamie?
So thankfully, it's I'm part of my own branch that I set up in college in DCU is part of a much broader international movement with over 150 branches across 8 countries in the world. It's 13 years old, set up in 2012 in Minnesota by Ilan Sinelnikov, an Israeli American. And essentially, I came across his organization last August of 2024, and Elan and I kind of struck up a relationship. We'd call on the phone every now and then. And I was
Yeah,
trying to kind of, stay involved in a bit of Israel activism now and then. Um, but essentially, big turning point for me was I went over to the SSI annual student conference in Florida in December. And that
yeah,
was a massive thing personally. Elan invited me to speak on a panel amongst other international students about what it's like to be a Zionist abroad outside of North America. And I just loved it. It was a real life changing experience. And essentially, then from that point, that was just before Christmas last December. And in January and February, then I started the process of trying to gather up signatures for a society, a branch of SSI on my own campus. And that led to March 6th. We had our first meeting in person, about 15 of us in the room. We talked through what we wanted to achieve, what the organization was, and what events we wanted to hold. And that was covered by the Jerusalem Post invited me to write an opinion piece for them about that. Um, and at that stage, we thought everything was very positive. And yeah, ever since week 2 of January of the January semester, so about the third week of January, I'd submitted to the university all the necessary things to establish a society. So your list of interested members, a constitution, and a plan of activities. And yeah, so that was the story up to March 6th, and I'm sure we'll get into what happened after that now.
now this is this year.
Correct. Yeah,
So it's
last month.
last month you're talking about. So this is relatively new. And when you attended the conference over in Florida, was there a commonality among the stories that people were telling about the hostility towards students in general? Is it a commonality of experiences really?
Everyone
Would
would have
you?
experienced hostility, definitely. It did vary depending on the country background they came from. So, for example, I'm not Jewish, so what a Jewish student, that experience could be a bit different for me.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
also, yeah, also it did vary as well based on country. So, for example, in Ireland, or sorry, I'll take the UK for example. I have a friend who runs an SSI branch in London, and as he describes, unfortunately, a lot of the hostility there comes from the descendants of people living in the UK of mainly Arab, Middle Eastern, Arab Muslim backgrounds who
Yeah,
have unfortunately retained the same grievances and hatred towards Jews and the Jewish state that that would have been brought by their parents, for example. Um,
generations. Yeah,
so exactly. So in the UK, you look at a lot of the protests or some of the demographics of a lot of people that would be the chief kind of adversaries against Israel within the UK. They're often not of a British ethnic origin. Whereas in Ireland, because we haven't experienced the same levels of migration that the UK has over the last few
yeah.
decades,
Hmm.
it's actually mainly concentrated from Irish leftists, and of course there are non-Irish people involved in that, but it certainly is a little bit different in Ireland, where it's really a cause that is taken up very strongly by the native population, to use that word.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, and then people would have been involved in varying degrees. Um, I mean, there was a batch of students there from Columbia University. That's probably one of the most most hostile campuses in the United States the last 18 months.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, no, it was good to meet other students like that who've had similar experiences.
I know I've been in many, a few marches on that were held that we marched from the Dáil to the Israeli embassy when that was a shattering loss to the small Jewish community in Ireland when the embassy closed. And I had met Dana Elker herself twice, before the embassy was closed, a very impressive lady, I must say,
Hmm.
confronting the abhorrent hostility. That's indeed, we must say, we're not fools. We must acknowledge that the hostility isn't confined alone to a few leftists or
No,
students.
yeah, yeah.
The mainstream media, for the I hate using that word because there's nothing main or stream about them. There's nothing impartial about a lot of the media, both print and broadcast media in Ireland. It's very, very disturbing. When they
Yeah, and it
continue.
has, sorry, like those anti-Israel policies have been adapted by the government of today as well. And
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
mhm,
Well, we had a big well, I say the Jewish community had a big protest initially when they were trying to pass the occupied territories bill. The so-called anti-Semitic bill. I call it. We call it the anti-Semitic bill because the only territories mentioned is I don't know what they're talking about territory. But anyway, I've been to Israel. My daughter and husband at the time worked there when they got married first, so I've been to Israel and. People should go there. It's a magnificent country. It's a huge confluence of different people. Both Arabs and Jew live and serve in the judiciary, in the civil service, in the government, side by side, peacefully. And people should go there, and
mhm,
understand the thing for themselves. But
yep.
I think this is a fantastic initiative, students supporting Israel. I've interviewed many people, both in the media and different people from Israel down through the years on this program. And I'm due for another one now, maybe in another few weeks. I'm a check in with one of the well-known right up there, northern Jews, northern Israel. He's a stalwart of Lear Confidential, and that's it. But I mean, there, I mean, the history of this country is nothing to be proud of. Even going back to the time of Eamon de Valera and when he went up to the German ambassador's residence to sign the book of condolences on the death of Hitler. Even
Hmm.
from that time on, we've had history with. We attended the Evian conference as one of the non-aligned countries, and we refused point blank to take even one Jewish child into safety. And we know what happened to a lot of those children down through the years they call it the Holocaust, but I like to use the Jewish word Shoah. which is destruction. Destruction. That's what it was. Holocaust sounds like a sacrifice. There was no sacrifice made by the Jews to it. It's just far the opposite, you know. So people should, I'd say, learn their history as well, you know. But the
And we
Jews,
should recognise that our own city of Limerick was the location of a pogrom in 1904, led by the local Catholic priests, which was a real stain on Limerick's history, in my opinion.
oh, absolutely. And some a lot of those went to. I'm from Cork, went to Cork City to live, and one of them, not one of them, but we had a Jewish Lord Mayor of Cork, uh, Gerard Y. Goldberg, solicitor, and he was elected Lord Mayor twice in Cork City, and they found a good home in Cork, and he was one of the early uh, movers of free legal aid. It wasn't called that, but he represented an awful lot of the poor people of Cork who hadn't the means or the wherewithal to do that, and his office was like a local bus station all the time, you know. But he's passed now, but his name will always be remembered as one of the true heroes of society in Cork and the wider thing as well, you know. But as you said, there's an awful lot of coverage given to people like Richard Boyd Barrett, people like Paul Murphy, and I don't mind mentioning their names, they can sue me if they like. Their vitriol that they spew, and Sinn Féin as a party as well as being very disappointing as a political party. They should know all about persecution. They have members in the 6 counties as well. They should be well aware of discrimination, and yet, it's. What about Jewish students in Dublin University? I presume there's a few Jewish students there.
Well, yeah. Just before I come to that, I mean, it's important to note, like when we're listing out key figures, even people like Simon Harris, he
Yes,
seems to have made it his main raison d'être of foreign policy over the last year. Ever since I remember his speech at the Fine Gael Ardèche last April, I watched it back. Just the absolute, the usual 10 seconds of lip service condemning October 7th, before going on to spend the next 2.5 minutes excoriating Israel.
yeah.
A nation that really should be celebrated, and people should seek better relations with, to be honest. But yeah, no, anyway, so basically in DCU there isn't a big Jewish student population at all. I genuinely only know about three. So most of our group was made up of very differing backgrounds of Christian, Muslim, and atheist backgrounds of very different, of various countries as well. And yeah, Trinity would have a bigger population. There's a Jewish society in Trinity, whereas there's not in DCU.
Yeah,
And then there's also a Hebrew society in UCD.
I know what you can see. We have a collage of your. That's one of the. I won't say round table now. It's a square table.
Yeah.
One of your meetings as
So that was
well.
our meeting on March 6th. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then on the right there is a couple of photos. The bottom one is when we were in Berlin. We got the
Yes.
flags out in front of some key sites.
Of course,
Um,
sorry for calling it's mandatory in all schools in Germany to educate about the Shoah.
Correct.
It's
Yeah.
part and parcel of the curriculum.
Hmm. So, but then we come on to when things got a bit more sinister for my group. Um, that photo there it was in the right middle. It's of us standing at a table, myself and yeah, sorry, that one there on the right, myself and
The five of you.
correct. So that was only a week after the meeting, the square table meeting as we call it.
Yeah.
It was held. We did that on March 13th. So we basically just set up a table in the main student building, a very harmless action. We just brought out our flags. We had some leaflets from SSI, and we had some hostage posters.
Yes.
And we weren't shouting, we weren't playing any music, we weren't,
Just
brandishing any.
just there with your stuff.
Exactly, and it should be said as well just how normal and common that is among all the student societies. You could barely go one day of the week without at least one society setting up a table in that building, trying to recruit new members essentially, and just talking to anyone going by. Yet, and a really jarring thing when you think of the double standards is the fact that, excuse me, when you think that the BDS DCU branch, so boycott, divestment, sanctions, a very radical group, they have held multiple events over the last 18 months across the university, booking rooms, inviting in guest speakers. Um, Most notably, of course, last October, um,
Yeah,
they
I saw some footage of that on TikTok.
yeah, but last October they brought in Zach Hania, who is a cousin of the former Hamas leader Ismail Hania, and he proudly acknowledged that Ismail was his cousin. And this guy being brought into campus, and I brought it to the attention of the administration and the university, and unfortunately they didn't care and took no action. Yet us simply setting up that table drew condemnation from the students' union, both from the students' union and from over 50 other clubs and societies who called for us to be disbanded by the university. Now, when we stood there on that day a few weeks ago, we were there
And
for
sorry, did they give any reason why they wanted to suspend it?
well, they saw us as basically being a stain on the university. The fact that,
Oh,
like, I was very proud that we weren't the first Zionist student grouping to be set up in Ireland's history, but we are currently the only active Zionist student grouping in the country. So we were very proud of ourselves for that. Um, but unfortunately, the Students' Union, a group that is meant to represent, of course, all students in the university, they simply pledged their continued support for Palestine. And then we had all those other clubs and societies calling for us to be punished as well because of the disturbances that we had caused to student life. So we were there for about 2 hours, and a few people even came up and had a few positive words to say, and we recruited a few new members.
yeah.
There was also those people who, just it's not something that they really care about, so they just walked on neutral. Then you had some people who would be angry and were just kind of glare at you as they walked past. And we had some coming up kind of, trying to agitate, kind of getting in arguments. But again, nothing serious. Where things really kicked off was over the weekend then, when there was an Instagram post put up of our table, and that received over 2,500 comments and about 150,000 views, I think, on the post. And it was just some of the most vile, hateful, threatening language you could possibly imagine. Like, huge amount of um,
I thought
threats, kind of
yeah,
anti-Semitic language.
the language of ignorance. That's what it is. Yeah,
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Very, very personal stuff to the five of us,
yeah.
um, and yeah, that really kind of drew a lot of attention to us, a lot of negative attention.
Well, I mean, we hope to do our bit in promoting energy. I mean, any events that you have, you can let us know, and we'll certainly. I'm going forward. We'll certainly promote it and publicize this on our YouTube channel. And there's no problem about that because I mean, Israel itself as a country. I mean, I always contend myself that Palestine is not a country, but
Oh no.
it never shaped up and never attempted to be a country.
Hmm.
Now you go from that extreme to the other suggestion by Donald Trump about making it the Riviera of the Mediterranean. Now, it could have been the Riviera of the Mediterranean if you had the proper people running the country and built it up and all as they did, but they're living off of free money since the foundation of Palestine, we call it, and Israel. They both got their. Unfortunately, the way the lines were drawn in the sand through the Balfour Declaration is not the fault of either the Arabs or the Jews. That's the way the international community did it. And what Israel did is got on with living, got on with building up an economy, got on with building up the modern state that they have today. And there you go. And of
Yeah,
course,
all sorts of institutions, setting up welfare for its citizens, and
yeah,
really like just that fundamental thing of nation building. What I admire Israel so much for is
yeah,
not only is it the most successful and prosperous country in the Middle East, it's also the most democratic, and they've managed to do all that on a tiny area of land surrounded by hostile
hostility.
countries
Yeah,
who have invaded many times, and all that without the natural resources that, for example, the Gulf states have, like
yeah.
Saudi, Bahrain, Qatar,
Uh,
etc.
the oil, they had the oil that they use for funding terrorism. Let's admit it. And
Mm.
the money from the oil funding terrorism. But I mean, Israel, as you said, is the only democratic country in in that area of the world, and there is not one Muslim country on the planet that is a democracy. As well, people shouldn't forget that, particularly the provost of DCU and people who are hostile towards the society. They shouldn't
Mm.
forget that
And
in the wider community.
and then there's a very key thing. If anyone who tries to downplay or deny the very telling effects that simply culture has on an area, and the way culture and people's mindset can affect their ways, their values, and their quality of life, and society that they ultimately build up for themselves.
Yeah,
Gaza and Tel Aviv are less than 100 kilometers apart from each other. And yet, you look at Tel Aviv, an area that was simply sand in the 1910s and 1920s,
have
and
you
it's
all
been built,
photographs of it? Yeah,
yeah, and it's been built up to be a phenomenal European style city on the Mediterranean that has brought in enormous economic success, freedom for its citizens, and is ultimately just a beautiful place to visit. And you had Gaza then, like I said, so near on the same area of land, just down the coastline, and it was turned into a military fortress from which to launch these attacks, led
I
by a
know.
death cult indoctrinating its own population. So it's a huge revelation of what different populations and cultures can do for an area.
I'm with Jamie O'Mahony here on their confidential, and all the details on the bottom of our screen. Our email and phone number. He's one of the founding members of a branch of the Students Supporting Israel in DCU in Dublin, and fair play to him and all the lads involved as well. Particularly in this very very hostile environment that we are now forced to live in. Where we have a hostile media by and large, a hostile academic thing
Mhm.
and I think I've enrolled myself in university to go back this year myself in September for my sins, but in TUS, the University in the Shannon, which is the old LIT, maybe a branch of the Students Supporting Israel might be well and truly after my few walkings around the place, and I see all these posters on Palestine. People don't think, they don't educate themselves. And I had an incident myself 2 months ago. I was wearing a badge of take in the bus, local bus. When two women started shouting at me. Shouting. Now I don't mean saying challenging me about being a Jewish lover and all. And I didn't engage in conversation with them at all. I was sitting down, as the man said, minding my own business. But I've been in the world long enough to know, initially when the shouting stopped, they can't shout forever. They sat down there after getting there, and they sat at the only seats available to them were the seats opposite where I was sitting, and they were wearing these kafia,
Yes.
these what we call, I think as a, I don't know really, I don't even know what did they understand what they were. But anyway, after a while, when I didn't engage them, I just asked them, are they going to college and are they working? Small things like that, and they sort of were a bit bemused in the beginning that I would talk to them after they're rolling and shouting, and I said, were you ever in the Middle East? And could you visit the Middle East at all, or any country like that? Just normal conversation. And I said, you were shouting at me about free Palestine. I said, could you tell me exactly, and from the river to the sea? I said, Do you know actually what that means when they say it in Arabic? You know what they're saying when they say from the river to the sea? They're calling for the complete annihilation and destruction of a complete country and every single person, human being in it. That's what they're calling for. And you think that's okay?
Yeah, it's an extraordinary, like what really is telling about this issue, almost more than anything, or certainly in my life anyway, that I've seen kind of captivate broad swathes of the population, people chanting um, so many slogans that they don't understand what they mean, as you mentioned there, from the river to the sea. A lot of them not even knowing what river, what sea. But it's so telling the extraordinary lack of knowledge, the absolute shallow depth of knowledge that people have about a topic that they feel so emboldened to speak about. I mean, my tester that I always try with people, and again, it should be a very basic question, is, do you know who Mahmoud Abbas is? Like, this is the president of the Palestinian Authority, a man who's in his 20th year of a 4 year term, and people don't know who he is. And it's the same
And
with other. You list
and
other big names, whether it be David
exactly.
Ben
I
Gurion.
mean, well, the two girls in the bus with me, I said, "Do you know who Yasser Arafat was?"
Mm,
And they said he was. Well, they do. They heard the name. I said he was an Egyptian Arab
yep,
who took over the Palestinians and renamed it the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. That's who he was. He said. I said he
yep,
became an absolute multi-millionaire out of it.
yep.
Multi-millionaire. You know, he died in a hospital in Paris. I said his wife inherited millions, never worked a day in her life, inherited millions and millions of UN money, blood money. I said that's who he was. You know,
Yeah, I
that's
mean, and the man was born in Cairo, as you said. Like,
yeah,
it really was just a hijacked. It's only ever been a hijacked or a nationalist movement created just to try and undermine the Jewish state. It's always been Palestinian nationalism has always been merely a Trojan horse for the destruction of Israel. That's all it's ever been.
I know, and I think the international community, apart from a few Arab states, I think the one good initiative about America. I mean, there's all different questions about America as a country, what it's doing, etc. But that's maybe for a separate discussion. But the Abraham Accords were the beginning of something very, very, very positive, and I
Hmm.
think that they were not pursued by the Biden administration, you know, because of
No.
politics, nothing else, because of
Yeah.
politics, and they should have been, and that could have had a huge influence on the Gulf states around Israel, because
Yeah, I guess.
you know,
I mean, the Abraham Accords were signed in the summer of 2020, and you obviously the Biden administration taken over 6 months later. But I think sadly there were far too many people in kind of leadership roles in that administration who represented a sort of establishment old guard when it comes to American policy making and thinking towards the Middle East. People
yeah.
who, people like John Kerry, who really seriously believe that if they try and magic up some two-state solution, that'll create peace in the Middle East, as if that will make all the other problems go away, as if Iran will start treating women well, or the war in Yemen will suddenly be solved. I mean, like Douglas Murray makes that point very well, or that the Muslim Brotherhood will simply cease to exist in Egypt. That
Yeah.
all these problems will simply go away if you try and solve this
Well, I mean, I'm
tiny
around now.
geographical area on the map.
I'm around long enough to remember the old heroes, and I was speaking to them a few. They retired military at the time I was in Haifa. I was in Haifa, a beautiful city, and you have the modern Haifa down by the bay, where all the cruise ships come in. And as you go back up towards, you have the old preserved part of Haifa as well. You go from the modern to the old all in the one day, which is phenomenal place to visit. My
Hmm,
favorite place in Israel, is Haifa, and up to
lovely.
Mount Carmel, and down Ben Gurion Avenue from Mount Carmel. Whereas if you love coffee drinking, you love going down Ben Gurion Avenue because the beautiful aroma in the morning early, the smell of coffee. Ah, Anyway, it's it's another joy as well. You know, simple things in life. But
Mm.
I think that unfortunately, I don't think there'll ever be a two-state solution. I think that I don't think there'll ever be a Palestine state. And I'm not mitigating against it or anything. I'm just saying that most of those displaced Arabs that originate from Jordan will have to look forward to a day when there won't be Palestine, and they have to really look hard at themselves, because I don't think there can ever be a two-state solution with the ideology and the ingrained hostility that those Arabs have towards the Jewish state. I can't see it being reconciled. There's no such thing as a two-state solution. They're all talking about a ceasefire, and this. They want the state, democratically elected government of Israel, to surrender to Hamas, to call peace. I mean, how can you surrender to, as Golda Meir said, how can you negotiate with people who want to kill you? Plain and simple.
Hmm.
I mean, she was a brilliant leader, Golda Meir. There's a film on her life. Helen Mirren plays Golda
Helen
Meir.
Mirren, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it was a brilliant film, but it got the story across to people anyway. You know, I think it was a great film, but I think she was. I don't think she smoked as many cigarettes as she did in the film. You know,
Yeah.
that's
But it certainly is like very telling when I think about, you know, people in our part of the world, Ireland and the Western world generally, who have, you know, held up this ridiculous sign, this kind of metaphorical sign over the last 18 months, trying to claim that through their anti-Israel actions, they don't actually stand with Hamas. They're merely pro-Palestinian. But the biggest um, revelation against that that theory, that sort of statement of theirs, was over the last few weeks when we had these extraordinary anti-Hamas protests finally take place in the Gaza Strip, and the people realized that the people who both started and were perpetuating the war were Hamas, and unfortunately, none of their Western supporters, quote unquote, in our part of the world, were in favor with, stood with them. People like Uday Al Rabai, who was beaten to death by these Hamas thugs. No one in our part of the world is sending solidarity to him. They all went absolutely quiet when the Gazans they claimed stood for actually turned around and were hostile towards Hamas. So that was a very sad but not particularly surprising
that's right.
um,
That's
time
right.
over the last few weeks, I thought.
And if they only stood back for a few minutes and stay calm and make a calm, informed assessment when they see less than 60 miles from Gaza that Arabs and Jews can live and coexist and respect each other, young and old, no doubt, mass Arabs now. It's a huge mixture of people living, working, and making and educating themselves in Israel and setting up businesses. It's just there are positive signs in Israel. There's no doubt about it. There was a Jewish Palestinian youth center. I visited when I was over there in Haifa, and I passed it down in the morning early with my white legs and my white shorts, and it just intrigued me because you hear so much misinformation on this side about the whole area. And I
Mm,
said, these are there's hope for the generation coming up. I
mm,
think there are strong hope for the generation coming up. They have a different perspective on life. They have a more positive outlook. And I went into this center, and it's just I'm sorry I didn't have a camera with me, you know, to just to record them, and just the positivity and the attitude to each other was, you have to see it, you know. And I was very heartened to come away out of it anyway, you know. It was about
mm.
8 or 9 years ago now when I was there, but anyway. Um, I think that what you're doing, Jamie, and your group is to be welcomed. I hope to spread this SSI. I hope to spread to other third level institutions in this country anyway, if nothing else, but to educate people, Students supporting Israel, you can see the caption up there, pro-Israel, dark grassroots, and you have a website, have you? Yeah,
Um,
SSImovement.org.
yeah, that's not our direct branch, but that'd be the website for,
Information.
for the whole movement. Yeah, for
Yeah,
the movement.
yeah, yeah. So if people are interested in it, and I would suggest it, if nothing else, just to inform yourselves of the situation in Israel and the situation in the Middle East. And after
Yeah.
all, universities are for the free movement of people, free speech, been downgraded somewhat, and free exchange of ideas, so we
Hmm.
can educate and improve ourselves about the situation, and not to live in ignorance, really, not to listen
Certainly.
to
Yeah.
the person who's shouting the loudest, because generally speaking, they're not right, as a general,
Yeah.
in my opinion,
Yeah.
and
So
if it,
the next step now that I'm really looking forward to. So
yeah,
I've only got about 2-3 weeks left before I finish college, but I'm actually traveling with some SSI members from America to Israel between May 19th and May 29th, which I'm very excited for. It should be a phenomenal
well,
opportunity to
you're going to
experience.
Israel, are you?
Correct. Yeah, yeah, I'm going with
Uh,
those American students.
you're looking forward to that, I'm sure.
Big time. Big time.
Yeah. You love Israel. And if you like, as I said, if you like coffee, you'll really love Israel, I mean, it's
Yeah.
just
Well,
fantastic.
sorry, like I'd been previously, and in 2022, and that really was a big
Oh,
kind of.
you were there a few years ago, were you?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's not my first time. It's not my first time.
What part were you in? Were you in? Well, obviously, you flew into Ben Gurion Airport.
Flew into Ben Gurion, and then a couple of days in Tel Aviv, a couple of days in Jerusalem, and then a small period in Judea and Samaria as well, or as people like to call it, the West Bank, which I think is one of the most nonsense terms for an area in a long time. I mean, we don't call Clare the West Bank of the Shannon. We don't call Germany, or sorry, we don't call France the West Bank of the Rhine.
Yeah, I know.
So it's simply this, and the term, no doubt, it was fabricated about 70 years, 80 years ago, upon the drawing of the armistice line in 1949 between Jordan and Israel, um, and it's intentionally so. I think that term has been perpetuated to discredit the Jewish historical claim to that area of land. I mean, Judea and Samaria are terms that go back about 3,000 years on any map. The term West Bank is only about 70 years old.
Well, Jamie, it's been a fascinating conversation. Well, this is the first hopefully of many we'll have over the next couple of months or so, and we wish
Definitely.
we wish the group every success. I'll just put it up once more for people to see, but you can always go on to the website of the general movement, students supporting Israel. And if you know of anybody or group of people, particularly in third level institutions, that want to begin a branch, well, you know who to contact and what to do. The SSImovement.org, and you'll get all the information there. But we'll put those up in our program when we're finished, and those links as well, And
Lovely.
Jerry, man, I tell you, fair play to you, the country needs more people like you, without a shadow
Thank
of
you
a
very
doubt,
much, Pat.
who can stand up and speak without fear or favor, as I thought one time was a great thing you could do, get your old bottle box and stand up in the corner of the square, but I'm afraid we've lost that capacity for free speech, but hopefully not altogether. So from Jamie O'Mahony for students supporting Israel Group, a badge in DCU, and fair play, and we hope to speak to you again soon, as I said, Jamie, and we wish you a successful trip to the US and Israel. So,
Thank
and
you very much, Pat.
also success in your college as well. You're halfway through your course.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it 2 more years?
2 more years. Yeah. Yeah.
They'll fly. 2 more summers. That's how it is.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you very much, Pat.
Timmy, I mean, thank you very much, and take care now, and shalom.